The Global Longevity Summit is taking place between the 28th and 30th of October 2025 in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, called Mastering the Aging Clock, the Science of Longevity, and under the banner Transform Your Practice and Patient Care, the event is an unprecedented assembly of the world's most respected leaders in longevity, science, healthcare, innovation, and anti-aging medicine. Now, Professor Dr. Dominik Thor is president of the Geneva College of Longevity Science and also a professor of pharmacy. His research focuses on biomaterials, regenerative medicine, and pharmacy, and he joins us here today to talk about the conference. Dominik, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Phil.
Well, great to have you here, Dominik. Obviously, a lot of very interesting things happening with GCLS, which we'll lean into in a short while. But let's just talk a little bit about the summits. What are the key messages or topics that you'll be addressing at the conference?
Well, it's about innovation, right? So I think it's tremendous that this summit is taking place in Geneva, which is obviously the home of GCLS, and Switzerland as a hub for longevity, I think, is attracting more and more international conferences. But it's especially interesting to see Informa and A4M coming because they are undisputedly, right, the biggest leaders in the field of, medical continuous education. So it's wonderful to see them taking an interest in longevity and doing it in Geneva. And I will be specifically focusing on the innovation that is happening in the field, right? So how to bring those innovations, let's say, from bench to bedside, how we can, hand over to the doctors the tools to actually help their patients do something about age-associated disease and health span in general.
Yeah, great. Well, of course, you mentioned education there, and that's core to GCLS's thesis, right? So you've got your Executive Master of Science in Longevity part-time format course. So how do you approach that course when you've got a diverse group of people in all parts of the world? How do you deliver that continuity of education to your students?
Brilliant question. Of course, it's a challenge because we see different kinds of students. So I would say all of them are very accomplished because this is an executive course. So you have a lot of great clinicians that come to us, want to study and take the masters. I mean, we also have a continuing medical education program for doctors that want to keep it more hands-on and practical. But of course, academic education is wonderful and it leans into the preclinical as well and many other factors that are important. And one of the challenges, as you said, is you have different kinds of students with, different knowledge when they go into this course. So we have people that are very accomplished founders, running huge skincare companies, hotel chains. We got lawyers, and obviously we got the doctors and researchers. So I think what's very important is that in the beginning, when they set out, that you offer them courses that, well, for the doctors may be more of a repetition or, something that they heard before maybe, and we go into a little bit more of detail. And for the others, it's about, establishing a baseline, getting them to understand what we call the biology of aging. So starting with what is a cell, what does it do, and how it's being impacted as we grow older. And then, of course, going into the hallmarks and how they become relevant as starting points for any sort of scientific focus in the case.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Dominic. So I guess you're mixing, as you say, like wellness execs with doctors. What sort of requirements do you have for people taking the course? I mean, is there a kind of minimum level of entry of knowledge in the space, or do you take people that are completely green and then bring them up to speed?
Well, since it's an executive program and it's running ideally just 1 year, I mean, it's very flexible. It's online. We have our in-person meetings, but it's asynchronous as much as possible because we get students from 5 continents. So it also means that you have people that are working very hard, that have family lives already going on. It's not like you're teaching 18-year-olds. So we respect that some people need to take a break, and then it takes maybe longer than 1 year. And these are, again, some challenges that we need to overcome. And I think we are doing so brilliantly thanks to the help of our faculty members that are very flexible and allow us, to offer great insights into the various factors that are relevant for longevity. And it's not just the biology side of things, it's psychology that plays a part. And we're looking at regulatory and finance, as in, how can we as societies finance this shift towards a more preventative approach to healthcare?
Yeah, and of course, we last met at your conference in Dubai. So, in terms of your recent announcements and initiatives, what's new at GCLS since we saw you back in, I think it was February, right?
It was February. Yeah, well, it's real. Everything is developing at a breakneck speed in this field, which is on the one hand very good, but on the other, of course, some things may feel a bit rushed to people that are, a little bit outside the bubble, as I say. So I see the main mission of GCLS to really sort of streamline that and, sort of shift through everything and reduce the noise. So really stick to what has been clinically validated or where we at least see some strong evidence that this might be useful. We've been focusing, of course, on our education offerings. So we started with the Executive Master's Program. We're now working with a very respected European university to add to this academic track to also offer a PhD program, hopefully already in 2026. We introduced continuing medical education. So for those doctors saying, well, I can't commit to a 1 year study program, that is also about writing a thesis, about, preclinical research. I want to stick to what I can use in my practice. So we have an offering for those people now, and we're going to further include deep dives into let's call it more advanced therapies or women's health and other aspects which I think are very, very relevant to the doctors for them to specialize in maybe. And we are also introducing professional courses, essentially teaching those experts that the doctors typically work with. So that is nutritionists, physiotherapists, fitness trainers, and so on, to really become a place where we can welcome everyone who is interested in the field. And of course, we do these conferences, which I think are very important, especially if you provide online education, because you still need networking. You need to compare notes. You want to meet the faculty, other students. You want to, check what the other doctors are doing. So these things are very dear to us, and we're happy that we can invite as many students as possible. These are free events typically. And we try to be a wandering circus because our students are from everywhere. It doesn't make sense to bring everybody to Switzerland. Sometimes it's easier for us to go to Dubai, for instance. We're going to repeat that event, maybe even bigger, coming year in February. And we're now having in 2 weeks' time an event in Guangzhou in China.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about China in just a moment, but just staying on the professional certification. Obviously, you mentioned you've got your physician training, but also nutrition specialists and physiotherapists. So, what led you to seeing, specifically in physiotherapy, how that leans into the longevity thesis? Because as we all know, the industry is very, very wide. So, this kind of, you mentioned the circus. Is it a big tent, and you're trying to pull everybody in?
Well, I see a lot of these conferences that are so wonderful. We have brilliant researchers and physicians speaking there, but it tends to address, the same audience. We see the same faces, and it's wonderful to reconnect, and it's really nice to see those people again, and really acknowledge that they have been pushing this field forward for a long time now. And at the same time, there are lots of people that are now getting a big interest in the field. And if you don't provide them with access to proper academic or just very high quality education, I think we are getting to a point where things can get risky, where people might trust, sources that are not that dependable, some self-declared prophets on social media, etc. And I'm not having anyone specific in mind, but I think it's important to offer good education. And we see longevity now really not just something that's relevant to clinicians. It's really being adopted across many different industries: beauty, wellness, hospitality, and all those need, specialists. And of course, the doctors also work with these guys. So I think it makes sense and is a service to all the clinics that are operating in the space, to give opportunities for these experts to really focus on what's important in the context of, healthy aging.
Yeah, and I guess the field is evolving so fast, as we know. I mean, we cover news and breakthroughs every day. How do you keep the management of the curriculum at such a pace that it can keep up with the latest xenotherapeutics associated with skincare, for example, or the biomarkers? I mean, that must be quite a challenge to keep the curriculum up to date.
It is. It definitely is. There is not one week that doesn't go by where we don't need to update, our various modules. At the same time, of course, since we see this from academic perspective, I think sometimes we also need to take a step back and check whether it's actual, new relevant clinical evidence, or is it maybe just something that is, well, I would say, but still very experimental. And then we need to decide as a faculty whether that is something that already needs to be included, or maybe just mentioned, very briefly. So we say, well, this might become more interesting in the future as more data becomes available, but it's not something that we want to endorse right now. So it's always a bit tricky because, not everything that's out there and happening might already be at a point where we can say, oh, this should be part of our curriculum. So it's definitely always a team decision, and thankfully we have experts from many different fields that help us, decide, okay, what is relevant at this point.
Yeah, got it. And of course, you mentioned China earlier. I saw on your website that you've got your semester symposium coming up in Guangzhou. So, what's your take on the Chinese market? I mean, I've been there myself. I was quite blown away by the appetite there. So, you must be reflecting that by taking your symposium out to China.
Yeah, well, China, of course, is a huge market in every sense of the word. I think they have a different approach to things, where we in Switzerland and in Europe in general maybe are a bit more conservative from a regulatory perspective. They seem to be very eager to adopt what we would say are advanced therapies that are still in experimental stages. So I think that is another challenge for us as an educator, that we have students from everywhere, and depending on where you live, you may have access to different kinds of therapies. So we see in China, in Malaysia, in other parts of Southeast Asia, but also in Southern America, a lot of adoption of stem cell therapy and other things that are currently not being available to the physicians in Europe. So for us, it's a challenge, and it's very interesting for this reason to go to these places and sort of bring together our, I would say, Western faculty with these Southeast Asian experts and see, okay, where is the future of this field? What kind of, experiences do they have that they can share? Because we always need to check for, are we already there at a point where we can endorse these things, where we can include them in the curriculum? And it's fantastic. And we're doing it at the second biggest hospital in China, Longchang Hospital in Guangzhou. Honestly, I have to admit here live on camera that I didn't know too much about Guangzhou when I first got there. And it's 18 million people. It's mind-boggling. And it's right next to Shenzhen, which I think is another 16, and which is right next to Hong Kong, which is also a big city. So these numbers are crazy. And the team in Longchang is really impressive. We're going to run actually one whole floor of the hospital as a training center for GCLS, because they give us the opportunity to bring in our students, the doctors, to take sort of a fellowship position there and get experience also in these new kinds of advanced therapies, which I think is tremendous. And we are really looking forward to see how we can integrate Eastern anti-aging medicine and Western longevity medicine. Because, from simply a language perspective, sometimes the Asians, they don't like the word longevity that much. They still prefer what we think as outdated anti-aging. Because, when you translate it literally, it has a more proactive ring to it. So this is why they love anti-aging versus longevity.
Yeah, great. Well, Dominik, obviously we've got the Global Longevity Summit coming up. There are lots of events in the space, as you know. What do you feel sets this event apart from the others that are in the space?
Well, I think it's, of course, the ability of the organizers to bring leading researchers and voices in the field all together in one place. And then, of course, their focus on bringing clinicians, a lot of them from the States, that are interested, in creating new practices or deepening their, understanding in the field. And I think that is what we urgently require more good doctors, and giving them the access, to really update themselves on what's happening and what's available is very important. And we see more and more conferences, and I would say there are quite a few good ones, but in terms of quality that they brought together as educators and researchers in the field is very impressive. So we are very happy to have been invited there, and obviously it's one of the nicest events because I don't need to have to fly a long way. I'm already there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dominik, I'm really looking forward to the Geneva conference. And of course, thanks for so much for joining us today and all the great work you're doing in helping grow the sector. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you, Phil. Has been a pleasure for me as well.